So that's the end of my advertisement. Tonight, I am being joined by four really fabulous authors. We were having a few minutes of chat before we got started, and it was funny. So we are going to have a great time. Natalie Walters, Lynn Blackburn, Lynette Easton, Melissa Coslin, which I hope that's how you pronounce her last name because I forgot to ask. So there you go. But anyways, they're going to be joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about romantic suspense, and we're hoping they're going to join us. There we are. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Natalie, Lynn.
Hi.
And Lynette, I will tell your audience that Lynette is in her car. There was a confusion on where and who had to be somewhere with her husband, so she might pop in and out. So we're going to take her when we can get her. There she is. Yay!
Yay!
So now, and I told the authors and I warned them I'm very bad about picking a different one to start. So if anybody, notices I'm doing it wrong, somebody yell at me. So, so we're going to get started. I want each of you, and I know Melissa, I don't want you to feel left out because you have a fabulous book too, but you ladies who have the targeted together too, however you want to discuss that. But Melissa, I'm going to let you go first since you have Dangerous Beauty. What is your book about?
So it's about a young woman who has just escaped human trafficking and a man who offers to marry her and keep her safe in the US.
And it's edge of your seat, read it in a day thing.
That's what people are saying.
It's very good. I read it in a weekend. So.
Oh, good.
So who would like to tell me what Targeted or your latest book and then your story in Targeted? Natalie, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I was like trying to point down to Lynette. Okay, I will start. So my latest release is Fatal Code, which is part of my Snapped Agency series. It's Keikoa Young's story, and he is, unbeknownst to him, planted next to the target of an investigation, who is Eleanor. She is an aerospace engineer and is being stalked for a nuclear recipe weapon that she might have access to from her great grandfather. So he's there to protect her and find out who's after her and who's gonna get it. So that's Fatal Code. And then in my novella, which is part of the Targeted collection, it's called Caught in the Crosshairs, and that takes Ari Blackman, who is a former Army PSYOPs officer now working for the CIA and has been tasked to investigate Claudia Gallegos, a fellow CIA officer who is implicated in the murder of the Saudi prince in the US. And so they she's a very stubborn, strong-headed character. And so she's not going to just take this lying down, and he has to stay caught up with her and help her find out who is behind the murder. So.
Let's see, Lynette.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to apologize for it being so dark. I wasn't thinking about sitting in my car when the sun was going down, but anyway. Let's see. So Targeted. My character is Daria Nevsky. She is from Vow of Justice and was adopted by the St. John family. And so the novella follows her on an adventure where she teams up with Riker Donahue, who is now Dr. Riker Donahue, and he was in Active Defense. So I actually combined two different series to bring them together, but so the characters kind of all in each other. But and what was the Ravel book that I was supposed to talk about?
The Crossfire.
The latest release.
Crossfire. Okay, Crossfire is book 2 in the series, and let's see, what's it about? Oh, Juliana. I'm sorry. I'm only on the first book of the next series. I've already written 3 books. So Juliana is the hostage negotiator, and her younger sister is a senior in high school, and she comes to live with her after some family drama trauma stuff. And Clay Fox is the school resource officer. And so that's how they kind of get connected in that story. And of course, somebody from the past is kind of stalking into Juliana's future and causing all kinds of danger and stuff that they have to run from. So hopefully readers will love it.
Awesome. I'm glad you remembered, because I was going to have to get my copy out going, okay, what's this book about?
Oh, it's okay. It comes back to me eventually.
I have to admit, and Lynn, I'm sorry, I'm going to sidetrack here, but I
You're
love
fine.
that you guys have that. Like, obviously, the other three reacted the same way with like, yeah. So Lynn, your latest book and your story in Targeted.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of us aren't writing as many as Lynette is, but it's still, it is crazy because of the publishing schedule, how long ago you've actually written the book that you're talking about and what has happened since then. And yeah, it's a lot to keep up with. So my latest release is Malicious Intent. It's the second book in the Defend and Protect series, which is my Secret Service series set in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Malicious Intent focuses on Secret Service agent Gil Dixon and his childhood best friend, sweetheart, Dr. Ivy Collins, who, for various reasons, they have been out of touch for about 15 years, and they are thrown back together in terrible situation. And of course, he has to keep her safe and win her heart all at the same time, and which, it won't be that hard. But I like the romance side of it, so that's always my favorite part to write in mine. But it relates to Targeted because Gil is a twin. His twin sister, Emily Dixon, is in both Unknown Threat, which is the first book in the series. She's in there just a little bit. And then Malicious Intent, which is Gil's book. And so Emily, I love writing sibling relationships, and Emily was an easy choice to write a novella about. And Emily is a lot different from many of my heroines. I tend to have heroines that are, they're in law enforcement and they're tough and, all this stuff. And Emily does not want to get hot. She does not want to get sweaty. She does not want to be outside. She does not like bugs. Her favorite thing to do is get a mani-pedi and eat a burrito. I mean, this is, and of course, Secret Service agent Liam Harper's favorite thing to do is go spend 2 weeks in the backcountry of Montana. And I mean, how could they not fall in love? So I had a lot of fun writing that. It is Liam Harper is actually on the protective detail for, in my story, the vice president has a teenage son, and he is a bit of a handful, and Liam is the one who protects him. And then when he is in danger, they all get tied up in trying to figure out what's going on and protecting him. So that's my novella in the Targeted collection.
They're all so good. If you haven't read them, you're in for a treat. So you all write romantic suspense. One of the things I love about any genres in books, is everybody writes differently. They do. You all write the same genre, but every story is very, very different. So how do you keep it fresh, and how do you choose where you set your books? I know they're really separate questions, so we can attack them separately, or if you want to go all at once. Let's see, Lynette, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay, so keeping it fresh, that's really a good question. To me, the characters are what keep the story fresh. It's I don't know, they kind of take over, and in new situations, characters, new setting, that kind of thing. So to me, it's not that horror fresh. I don't think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe people think I'm writing the same thing over and over, although sometimes it does feel like that. But with the characters, it's just different every time for me. And as far as how to choose where to set my books, I generally choose to set them in places that I know Like I'm very familiar, obviously, with where I live and where I went to school and places I've visited. Although it's fun to go to a place and just simply do research. And so I actually have an idea for a series in another place that I've actually only been to once, but I really loved it, and I did all this research. And so, yeah. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. Natalie, how about you? How do you keep it different and fresh?
Um, I tend to agree with Lynette on the characters drive the story a lot of time, and I think that they do add different elements, especially if you pick characters that have different backgrounds. Like Lynn was saying, her character who's, you know, I don't want to get sweaty, I don't want to get dirty, and then you're going to throw her into a dirty, sweaty outdoor, you know, mess, and then throw, you know, mosquitoes at her or whatever. So it just, I think, makes it, you know, makes it exciting for readers to see that. And I also choose places that I'm familiar with, where, you know, I've lived in lots of different locations across the you know, the country and outside of the country. And so I naturally gravitate to those areas and feel like, okay, I can write a scene here, or this is where I would like to set something. So I do tend to go do what is familiar to me, because it makes it a little bit easier, and you won't get as many emails from readers who are like, that place doesn't exist. Which is always fun. Thank you for those. We are so grateful.
I was using my imagination.
That's right. I didn't know. I literally picked a name, and it just happens to actually be the city in that state. I didn't look.
How about you, Lynn?
Well, you know, like Lynette and Natalie said too, it is, you know, the characters drive a lot of that. I do sometimes have conversations with myself. I'm like, wait a minute, when did I last, you know, blow up a car? You know, like when did I last, you know, poison someone? Like, because you don't want to get back into that same well one book later. So, you know, sometimes there are times when I go, how many ways can I put this person in danger? You have to get, you know, kind of creative with it. But it is fun to do that. And there's also just the fact that no matter, even if someone else has done something very similar, it is a little freaky. Sometimes I'll read something and go, wow, we have a frighteningly similar premise, and yet we go in completely different directions with it. Because, like, you know, every writer, when they start writing, it's just going to go in a different way, in a different place. So yeah, I mean, I am intentional about trying not to repeat the same obvious, dangerous situations. I got a little creative in Under Fire, which comes out in March, to the point I actually asked if my readers, like, how do you feel about this subject? Just in a general, you know, is it, if you came into that, would you keep reading or would you stop? And most of them were like, I think I'd keep reading. I was like, okay, good. So there's at least one new one in that one. And then as far as location, I agree, like Natalie and Lynette were saying, I definitely tend to choose places that I'm familiar with, which for me is the Carolinas. But I do prefer, personally, I've realized that I prefer fictional locations as opposed to real ones. My first Revell series was written in a fictional town of Carrington, North Carolina. And then when I was deciding on where to place my Secret Service agents, I actually talked to my editor about it, because we were talking about city size, and there are 3 cities in North Carolina that have Secret Service offices, 2 resident agencies and 1 field office. And so the question was, you know, city size, which would you prefer? And that's part of how and I wanted it to be close enough to Carrington for my characters to visit and enter, you know, I like it when my characters make cameo appearances. So that was partly my decision, and partly determined by the storyline, because I did want the Secret Service offices to be in places they really are. But in future, I'm going back to some fictional towns, because I like the freedom of being able to make it whatever I want it to be. I can make I can put a lake in there, I can put a restaurant, I can do anything I want and no one can stop me. And I definitely prefer that.
How about you, Melissa? This is your second book, correct?
Well, I also finished Dream Within a Dream, Mike Nappa's series. So I finished that as well. But I've written a
Okay.
bunch of other stuff before coming to Revel. But
Nice.
keeping it fresh, I actually don't read a lot in the genre. So because I'm just terrified of accidentally picking up some theme or some little event or some little quirk and then like subconsciously, accidentally, like, so it kind of freaks me out. So so I don't read a lot in that genre. I read all kinds of other stuff. And as far as setting goes, it just depends on the story. Dangerous Beauty is set in mostly in Texas just because Liliana is from Mexico and she was brought over the border by traffickers, so Texas made sense. And then as like Lynn was saying, I do like to do some fictional stuff, like Merrick's Building in Dangerous Beauty. They're in Houston, but Merrick's Building is completely fictional. I just totally made it up. It's a building downtown and I made it how I wanted it. So, but other things like the park that they do go running in and that kind of thing, that stuff is real.
Interesting. Well, that's always a fun way to do it too, that it's either way, you know, is it all real or is it part of it fictional and some of it, you know, so it's always fun, especially if you've been to one of the towns, if it's real, wait, that doesn't exist, but that's fun, you know, it makes fun in the story. So now I have a question that came in already and I find it's an important question, but it's also a very interesting question. And this is for all four of you. Let me know if you need me to repeat it when we get to you. Are there any triggers in the books, any of your books, that people should be made aware of? Because you do have that with Suspense, that people have these different triggers. Lynn, how about you? Do you got any warnings? I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, you know, that's tough because sometimes what I don't really think would be triggering can be, and I certainly don't ever want to minimize any trauma that someone has experienced, and so it makes it difficult for them. From the novella perspective, I don't think so. I think it's pretty straightforward. You know, people are in danger. I think that's just part of it with suspense too, is you're going to have tense, dangerous situations. People are going to get shot at, things are going to explode, they are going to be running for their lives. So with that kind of blanket trigger warning, I don't think so. I am very sensitive to that, though. I know that some people had a few things in malicious intent that caught them off guard that nobody ever caught it. And then I actually had a beta reader for Under Fire, which comes out in March, who had some concerns about a possible trigger, and she just said, Jen, that's something it's an issue for me. I don't know that it would be something for anyone else. And so I do try to be really sensitive to that in the lead up to a story, because you don't want to hurt anybody when they're reading. It's supposed to be fun. The one thing that I always tell people about romantic suspense is part of why I love writing romantic suspense is that it's a romance. So no matter how bad it gets, you know, we can't kill everybody off. That's kind of a rule. You know, you have to have a happily ever after or it's not a romance. So for me, because I am actually a very sensitive to especially what I see. I'm really careful about movies. I don't do any kind of horror or anything like that. But it is part of what makes me love romantic suspense versus, say, just a straight up suspense or thriller. Not that I don't enjoy those, but you're not guaranteed. You know, there's a lot more potential for characters you love to find a very, very difficult situation they can't get out of. And at least with romantic suspense, you always have that in the back of your mind. You know, we've got that happily ever after coming, which makes the hard things for me as a reader a lot easier to handle. Even if I do find them disturbing, I know where we're headed with it, and that helps for me. But yeah.
Yes, totally get that. How about you, Melissa? I know, like you said, your second book is human trafficking. That's,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that one, it was hard to write because I'm very, very sensitive to any kind of sexual abuse. I
Okay.
don't want to write it. I don't want to read it. I don't want to, but the book is, it's after she escapes. So
Yeah.
you're not going to see no scenes that are direct. You do, she has some nightmares and you do get the sense that, okay, she was molested and that's about it. So you
Okay.
don't get into her dreams exactly. You see Merrick seeing her dream and like, thrashing in her sleep and stuff. So she was very upset by things that have happened to her, but there are no specifics at all. Like the editor actually had to make me get a little bit more clear about what she had gone through because I was being a little too cryptic because I didn't want to write it. So basically it's she was molested. That's about as much as you're gonna get.
So, and I'm not missing you, Lynette and Natalie, but I want to, you do it well. So when do you decide, Melissa, where to stop on that? I mean, I know they asked you to add a little more, but that was one of the things I was very impressed with your book. You knew what happened, and there was none of these graphic details that some of these books seem to want to include. So,
Yeah.
so where did you figure out that line was?
A lot of trial and error and
Oh.
the editors did a really good job helping me, having with a fresh set of eyes. Okay, I don't understand why she's so upset here. And I'm like, okay, I didn't make it clear enough what she had been through. So I added just a little bit until the editors were like, okay, I get that. So
Perfect.
that was
Interesting.
really helpful.
Oh, interesting. So, Natalie, how about you? What was I asking?
Triggers, right? Triggers.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't feel like currently in any of the stories that I've got written, including the one that's coming out in the novella collection, I don't feel like there's anything that's immediately triggering. I think, like Lynn was saying, again, depending on someone's walk in life, something they could figure out and see could be bothersome to them. But there's not anything that I've got in there that I can think of right now. So I feel like that's sort of my, not currently anyways.
How about you, Lynette?
I dealt with some topics for sure that, maybe should have a trigger warning. I mean, I dealt with suicide, I dealt with human trafficking, and I think my books are probably, I do have a few more gritty stuff in it. And as far as the current one in the novella with Daria and Riker's story, I trying to think of something. I mean, like Lynn pointed out, it is suspense. There's danger. And so, I mean, in the beginning, her home was broken into and someone had tried to attack her and managed to, wound her. And then at the end of the story, they do manage to grab her. There's a kidnapping. There's threatening to kill her. I mean, and in Crossfire, the book that comes out, I do deal with school shooting, and there is a situation at the school that could be very traumatic to someone who has experienced this. And unfortunately, there are quite a few people and students and young people out there that have experienced this. And so but if you read the back of the book, if you read the copy edit on the back of the book, that a school shooting is dealt with in this, and so that you can decide whether or not you can handle that kind of story or not. But I don't shy away from the tough stuff. I write about serial killers, and I don't get graphic, but I also don't downplay it either, if that makes sense.
It does.
Anyway.
Yes. And
yeah.
And and I've said it before. I mean, and there's certain thresholds we have plenty of imagination. I don't need people to explain things. So, but no, and I appreciate that when you can have suspense, and sometimes less said is more suspenseful anyways. So
yeah.
So somebody here has an interesting question. I'm gonna let, you know what, you guys can kind of, we'll just decide if somebody wants to answer this. Somebody is asking, what is the difference between romantic suspense and a paranormal romance with suspense elements? Yes, I did that right. I think I know the answer. Because none of you have paranormal, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we don't have that. Yeah. We leave out the paranormal elements. And
Yes.
there you have a romantic suspense. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And by definition, and I don't know if there's actually a written one, but I think romantic suspense and, you know, romantic, it's supposed to have two storylines with equal opportunities, so to speak, the romance and the suspense. Is that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, I think romantic suspense needs both. You need both the romance and the suspense to tell the full story.
Mhm.
It's not just that there's a little bit of a romantic thread in there that doesn't have anything to do with it. With that said, there's definitely a continuum. I fall on the romance side of the continuum. Lynette would probably fall more on the suspense side.
Exactly.
We have a running joke with I'm like, I have no problem writing my more romantic scenes. It's the suspense part that I have to work at, and she's the opposite. So not that she has trouble with any of it, but just she enjoys the suspense part more than I do. I once read a novella. I don't know. I think it might be in the Tanner Hollow collection, and I read the whole novella, and I got to the end, and I remember messaging her going, "I'm going to need more than just they kissed." Like, no, I've read 25,000 words, and you're gonna have to give me a little more than that. And she was like, well, it was the end and I was tired. I'm like, no, this is what we've been going for the whole time. So
That's
she
awesome.
was like, fine, I'll add a little more to it. So I think that's just, and like you said before, with our different personalities, and some stories just lend themselves to a little bit more suspense or a little bit more romance. And I think it's great that we have kind of the whole continuum within that, still in that romantic suspense framework, but there's a range depending on the author.
So which is easier for you to write, Melissa? Sorry, hit my computer. Romance or suspense?
I actually like them both equally. So
Oh.
I'm a 4th degree black belt, so I really like doing the fight scenes and that kind of thing. So, and then, I like romance too. So I don't know. I like them both. I guess I just fall into this genre nicely.
Yeah. And Natalie, which one is for you? I kind of wandered off on a track.
Oh, suspense. I can kill a person all day long. I have some torture. I like when I'm doing my antagonist POV, like that's usually a first draft cut. Like I do it and it's done. Like I don't gotta change it. I can slip into that like sick mindset very easily. It's not a good thing. And then the romance, I probably need to start sending my romance scenes to Lynn so that she can be like, okay, there is more than just like a pet kiss, like we need a little bit more, because it's just, I'm like, it's the hard part for me. I don't know. Even when I read like other genres and I see it done so well, especially like historical romance and like this, I'm like, just like, oh, why can't I write like this? Like, why can't I put that into my story? So yes, Lynn's on speed dial for a romance.
I'll do it. I'm here.
There we go. We've got a collaboration coming up next.
That's right.
It's fascinating, and on my camera, you guys are on the same side. Natalie and Lynn is on the same side, and Melissa and Lynn are on the same side. So I have my romance on one side and my suspense on the other. It works out perfect. So Lynette, what kind of research do you do for your suspense? And how do you stay off government watch lists?
Well, my husband has direct orders to throw my computer into the ocean should I ever get arrested. So, no, I I do so much research because my background is special ed. It is
Oh.
not police, law enforcement, whatever. So, it's funny because when I first started writing, I think it was right before Too Close to Home was supposed to come out in 2010, and I was at a writers conference, and I met this guy, and we were just talking or whatever, and I was like, I had been praying about this because I was like, God, I know that this book needs some work, and you know it needs some work, and we need to figure out how I'm going to get somebody to read it that can, tell me what I'm doing wrong and fix it. And on the law enforcement side of things. And I had asked a bunch of questions on a loop that I'm on. It's called Crime Scene Writers. And there's all kinds of special, law enforcement people. You got ATF, DEA, Secret Service, all these people on there. And they answer a lot of my questions, but I wasn't sure if I had written it right. So to make a long story short, this guy, we were talking in the lobby, and I was like, oh, so what do you do? He's like, I'm an FBI agent. I was like, thank you, God. And I was like, oh, cool. How would you like to read a manuscript that I have to turn in next month and critique my law enforcement? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to. And he's like, what genre do you write? I said, romantic suspense. And he was like, oh. So I sent it to him, and he did a great job, and sent it back and said, man, that was pretty good. You don't write like a girl. And I was like, I think that was a compliment. I'm not sure, but I'll take it. So anyway, of course, I thanked him in the story, and the acknowledgments, and then he's read each and every one ever since then. And it was funny because another friend of mine saw his name in the back of the book, and she emailed me and said, I used to work with him, and da da da. And so she ended up being my second FBI agent reader. So I have two FBI agents who read all of my stories for law enforcement and critique it all. So if anything in there is wrong, it's on me, not them.
Okay.
I try to get it as
awesome.
accurate as possible, but that's how I mean, pretty much. And then, occupations, you have to just, if I try to find somebody that does the job, I'm looking for a SWAT medic. So if anybody is a SWAT medic, I need some answers. So, yeah. So
well, there's a guy at our store that's ex-military, so I'll ask him if he knows anybody.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
I'll ask him
Great.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just might know somebody.
Anyway.
Who knows?
There you go. See, God just puts people in your life.
You always gotta ask, right?
Awesome how he does that. Yeah. So anyway, I do a lot of research. A lot of research. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to tag on that at all with your research?
I'll just add that in Never Miss, she was a sniper. So I actually have a friend who's a Marine. He was a Marine sniper. So he was really useful. He didn't have to fix too much, but he did have to tell me which gun she should use. So that was great.
Interesting. I find this fascinating that, you guys find these people you need for whatever. I mean, military, you guys have written, even, okay, Lynn, I got to ask, the Secret Service thing, did you talk to Secret Service or did they just call you once in a while? Make sure you're okay?
Like, hey, let me help you out. I would never have tried to write it if I didn't have a contact. I know someone who was on, he was actually on President Trump's detail at one time. And he very graciously agreed to answer my questions and spent literally hours with me on the phone when I was developing the series, just helping me think through. I don't write a big outline. I have a very general idea for each story, but he helped me think through what was realistic as far as what would the Secret Service actually do, and explained how it works. I had no clue about, you see the Secret Service with their, the earpieces and the sunglasses and the suits, and there's so much more. And so I had no clue. And he spent hours with me on the phone at the very, very beginning. And then kind of like when he didn't really want to read it, it's romantic suspense. It's not really his cup of tea, but he did answer multiple questions for the entire series all the way through. I in fact in Targeted, in my novella, I sent him a quick text and I said, what does the Secret Service call the vice president's house? Because what do they call it? And it turns out they call it the VP res. And so then during edits, somebody's like, what? I was like, no, I'm telling you, they call it the VP res. So yeah, so things like that. It was great because we spent sometimes hours on the phone, and then sometimes I would just send him a quick text. He did not want me to use his name, so I just have a general, thank you. And he was great. In Under Fire, I managed to write myself, which is coming out in March. I wrote myself into a corner that I couldn't figure out how to get out of, and I could not figure out how to fix it. So pretty much the ending of Under Fire is because of him, because I messaged him and said, this is what I've done.
Oops.
How can I make this work? And he was like, well, you could do this. I was like, done. That's what we're going to do.
That's it.
So yeah, so it is. I remember when I was first writing, that was my biggest question, was how do people find their sources, and how do they do their research? And it isn't, like Lynette said, God really does open doors. I have been very blessed, and sometimes it's just a matter of asking. You put it out on social media and people will respond and put you in touch with someone, and it's great. And then I always fall back on the fact that it is fiction. It's not, I am doing my best to be realistic and accurate, but at the same time, the odds of the Raleigh Secret Service office having 3 single hot guys who fall in love within the space of a year and a half with 3 brilliant women, I mean, let's face it, it's not likely.
It's a hotbed for single people.
You have to accept that it's fiction, but yeah, it's always, I wouldn't have even tried. There are some topics I wouldn't go anywhere near if I didn't have somebody that I knew could answer my questions.
So Natalie, I have a different question for you. And of course, again, you guys can all weigh in on this. What is one of the most interesting things you learned while you're doing your research? And did you include it in any of your books?
Oh, I mean, I've learned so much from researching. With Fatal Code, I decided to do the worst thing I think any author could do, and that was to pick a career choice that I am in nowhere near the leagues that I need to understand that. And that was an aerospace engineer. And to this day, if you were to ask my husband which book traumatized him as much as it was me, it was that one, because I cried so many times because I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And my all the computer science people I was like, okay, what is an algorithm again? Okay. And what is a code? And then having to explain that to me, and then me having to figure out how to explain that into a story. It was just painful. But I think because my series deals and even my earlier series, I think all deal with some sort of security and threats and, law enforcement. I think all of our stories, but as I'm researching, I am always surprised at just how many components there are within multiple agencies and multiple organizations to keep our country and the citizens safe. And it's not just one person or one agency, it's a combined effort. And so I'm always not surprised, but it's always surprising to me when when I need that character, or I need that element that I'm how am I going to bring this story and wrap it up together? And I will do research and something will pop up and I'll be like, oh, wow, okay, there's a Secret Service element, or here's, Joint Terrorism Task Force and all of that. But I think for me, it's always surprising how many organizations are involved in the safety of our country. So
Interesting. So anybody else have something interesting, your little tidbit you want to share with us that you found out?
While I was researching snipers, they actually take the Coriolis effect into account. Some people can shoot that far. So I found that fascinating.
That's
wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Huh. Well, there you go. Things you don't learn. change the
I
title
found
of
out
this.
something really interesting.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll share. So I was at a conference this past week teaching, and it was in Florida. And you know, they have these big oak trees, and you know that beautiful moss that hangs down really reminded me of like Savannah, Georgia, or in Charleston. They said, "Don't play with the moss; it has lice." I'm like, wait a minute, am I the only person on the planet who didn't know this? That the moss has lice? They're like, don't put it on your hair and take pictures. And I'm like, who would do that anyway? But it has lice. Now I'm just dying to figure out how to use that in a story. But anyway, I just thought I would share that. Yeah.
We'll look for it.
Well, I'm in Florida and I didn't know that. So
I
know,
lived in
right?
Savannah and I didn't know that. Like they've told me, I
awful.
mean, yeah, I didn't know that. It grows everywhere in Savannah. So
Yeah. I was saying, because I lived in
Yeah.
Beaufort, South Carolina for a long time, and they're like, oh yeah, you can use it for decoration in your house. I'm glad I didn't now.
I
Yeah,
know,
for
right?
real. I was like, ew.
We're gonna just have to burn it all now.
burn down the house.
Yeah, I gotta figure out how to use it in a story,
Yeah.
like to put it in a heroine's house, and she has to like find a way to get out of her house. They're like getting her out of her house so they can get to her. I think that
Oh,
might
I was
work.
thinking like in a
Okay, I'm
body,
sorry.
like the body,
We're not here to
like
brainstorm.
where do they have life?
Everything's
The
a
body,
story.
yeah.
Everything's a story. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Because
I
you would
like
think
I
like,
that.
oh, they were like, they got it from someplace publicly, but actually they were out in a place
Got it from
where
them.
there's that moss is growing. A
I like
nursery
it.
or something.
Are we taking notes?
Yeah.
This is pretty much what happens when we talk. I'm
Yeah.
not. I mean, this is fairly accurate right here.
We all need to use lice in our next books.
Make sure you thank me for this.
I will.
Full credit.
We'll be interested to see how all four of you get this in your next book. So we're looking forward to it. Okay, on from the lice. Melissa, your books, they're not only that romantic suspense, they're very, very issue driven. How do you find the balance to make sure like the issue doesn't either take over the story or just become a mute part of the story?
I don't intend to make them issue driven.
Oh.
I think that's probably why they don't take over. I just find something interesting, something that I feel very passionate about, and it's incorporated in the story. So that's probably why.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Of all the things you were going to say, that was not the one I thought. Awesome. I love that. So does anybody else have anything to add to that question?
Well, I've heard too that sometimes you don't know what the theme of your book is until you finished writing it. And if you go into it trying to make a point, it feels
forced.
stilted and preachy. If you just tell the story, then like Melissa said, sometimes you wind up with a really important issue being addressed, but that's not how I go after them either. Like if it happens, it happens, but that's not the point. So that and the editor at Revell, Andrea Doring, once told me that that's one of the things she loves about romantic suspense is that no matter how tough the issue is, it really can only take up about a third of the book because you also have the suspense and the romance. So you can address some really tough issues in a romantic suspense without it taking over because you just don't have room to get too far in the weeds with it. And that's true too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else have anything to add? So Lynn, what made you interested in romantic suspense? And then the last question I'm going to ask you, but I want all of you guys to answer the last part for sure is, and have you ever considered any other genre to write in?
Well, I legitimately wanted to be a spy. I mean, as a kid, I thought that would be the coolest thing ever. And I would have been horrible at it because I am a huge chicken. And so, I mean, it would have been a disaster. But as a kid, when I was telling myself stories in my head and really thought there was something wrong with me, as opposed to, oh, maybe she's going to be a writer, I always was the heroine, and it was usually some sort of, great heist, or, I was trying to, I had one whole very detailed thing about these teenagers who were working for the CIA anyway, when you're 8, 9, it makes sense. So I always wanted to. And then when I started writing, I actually did try to write romance, just because, again, as discussed, I love the romance. And inevitably, by the second or third chapter, somebody wound up being a spy or an undercover agent, or there was some big drama, and I quit fighting it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to write a whole book without this. So I might as well embrace it and go with it. And I did have to learn, to really pump up the suspense, especially at the beginning. But it was just, I would probably, I mean, maybe I'll someday write one, but I think no matter how hard I try, somebody's going to be in grave danger and things will explode. So I might as well just go with it. That's all there is I can do.
Yeah, you might have to stick to romantic suspense.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. Yep. Sorry about that. So, anybody else? What made you interested in this genre? Why this one? And then what else would you like to try someday? Maybe, unless you're gonna blow stuff up too. Melissa?
I'm a black belt, been trained for like 20 years. So
Okay, hold on.
So
just a
my
minute. That
stuff
is
tends
amazing.
It is.
my work tends to have a lot of actual fight scenes. So a little bit less of like the police, FBI, a little bit less of the law enforcement, a little bit more of the just fighting, that kind of more physical. So that I'm just naturally going to put that in there because, one, I understand what I'm writing. So, you kind of have to go with what you know. And then 2, I obviously find it interesting. And the romance, I just like romance.
Yeah.
I'm a girl.
Would you write just straight romance then someday?
I've written a bunch of other books under another pen name. So I've written a few just straight romances. And I have dabbled in paranormal, like very light paranormal as well.
Interesting. We're gonna find your pen name and go read those. So. How about you, Lynette? You've been writing for a couple of years now.
Yeah. So kind of like Lynn, when I was little, I wanted to be Nancy Drew. And so I read all Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and Sweet Valley High, all the Boxcar Kids. Oh, you name it. I read them all. I'm showing my age here, I guess. And so I think when I started writing, it was just really natural for me to fall into. I just love the idea of justice being served in the end, the bad guys getting what they deserved and all this stuff. And so that's what I read. And I loved Alfred Hitchcock and Agatha Christie. I read all those, and then I started writing. It just kind of naturally gravitated toward that, I think. And the romance part, Lynn's right. I totally go for the suspense over the romance, but I think I have a little romance in my soul. So I, even though I have to kind of work at it to get it in the book, like, okay, I'm on page 350 and they haven't even kind of like looked at each other. I have to go back and, they need to have some googly eyes and that kind of mushy stuff. I'm not good at the mushy stuff, but I go back and I put it in. So, and as for, did you want me to go ahead and answer the other question about writing for another genre?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just throw this out there. I would love to write historicals, like romantic suspense historicals. I think that would be really fun.
Why haven't you done
that? I
that?
love historicals.
Yeah.
I love history. Yeah.
I'll read it.
Yeah, I love the idea. So yeah, that's on Natalie, raise her hand. So I've always thought about that, but that's pretty much the only other genre I think would even. I wouldn't want to do straight romance. Somebody has to die. So straight romance is not going to work for me. And but yeah, I think we need a genre, historical romantic suspense. Totally.
I think so.
I like it.
I think you guys could all write one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Way
So
too
how about
much
you?
research.
True.
I like
I have
reading
to
them.
admit, now you guys all write really strong women, so you know, in the historical romance, that really strong woman would be great. So, so keep doing that. But okay, how about you, Natalie? Did you always want to
I'm
write?
just gonna like put my name down for Lynette to write the like Jack the Ripper type. Like that's what I'm seeing is like the Victorian killings, and yeah, I'm all for
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Oh, I could totally get me down for that. Yeah, that'd work. That'd work.
I'm here for it.
I want it. Yes.
How much, yeah, how much do you know about Regency? We can do a Regency
Yes.
one.
Yes.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Unlike Lynn and Lynette, I didn't grow up reading the like spy books and Nancy Drew. I wanted to be a babysitter as a babysitter club. Like I wanted to be, I was like, sign me up to be the babysitter club. But, but I feel like that actually kind of shaped my storytelling, because while I love the mystery and the suspense, I love thrillers. I love political thrillers. I love which I think is why the romance part does come a little bit more difficult for me. But I think that the idea like that I love creating a community in my story. I love the camaraderie that I develop between characters and the teams. And I think about, you know, like, oh, well, Babysitter Club, that was what they were a family and all from different backgrounds and all facing different things. And so I love putting that into my own stories. So that for sure is where I guess probably why I'm in this genre. Although I will say that my first manuscript had very little romance, and I was told by Diane Mills, who was my mentor at the time, she's like, you got to add some romance, and I was like, I don't know how, and so I had to read books on how, because I was like, I don't know there's no time, there's bullets flying. So
Yeah.
but I will say that if I had to pick another genre to write in, it would probably be contemporary romance, which is so weird because I love reading it. And if I could learn how to write it, maybe I would do well at it. I don't know. I love reading it. I love the smushy gushy feelings, and I love tormenting my characters with those, but it's so hard.
I love that you torment them with it. So we're getting close here to an hour, and I want to leave a little time so you guys can tell us about your next book and where we can find you and stuff. But I want to know this. I love this question. Somebody had suggested it to me a long time ago, and I use it all the time. If you can have dinner with an author, living, dead, doesn't matter, who would it be? I don't know who hasn't gone first yet. Has anybody? We'll go, Lynette. How about you? Do you have an author you would love to have dinner with, and who is it?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no, I don't know. I probably would like to. Somebody, a friend of mine said Jack Easton. No, I had dinner with him tonight. He's the one that's driving. So I would probably want to sit down with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Melissa, how about you? Who would you have dinner with?
Charlotte Bronte. Love Charlotte Bronte.
Yeah. See, that'll go well with our Regency suspense romance thing.
That's
Good
right.
job.
That's right.
Natalie, how about you?
Probably Joel Rosenberg.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He always seems to know things that nobody else should know.
And you want to ask him why he knows things that people
Yes,
shouldn't
I
know?
do. I do. I would really, especially because when I'm reading one of his stories and I'll ask my husband, because it'll have some military or government concept in it. And my husband looks at me, he's like, how does he know that? Why is this, because especially because the book, when it comes to print, has been written far before some of this stuff is coming out in real life. So Be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, he was one of those that his book came out 3 months before 9/11, and he had an airplane crashing into a
Yeah.
high
It's-
rise. It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, that's just
Crazy.
creepy.
Right.
Mhm.
And Lynn, how about you? Who would you have dinner with?
Well, so Lynette and I have a running joke that we're the same person. So she stole my first. But I would want C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I would love to just be a fly on the wall with the Inklings and just
Yeah.
the camaraderie of it, and just the thought of them talking about, Narnia and Middle Earth, and also really who has the time to write a whole language like so I just yeah, that would be mine. That would be mine for sure.
I would join you for that dinner. I would love to have just met now watched the Inklings as a group talking to
Yes,
each other.
yes, I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, in this part, you can talk about your new book. We all know the targeted one, but tell us what's coming up, and when, because I always want to know, is it a new series? If you can't mention titles and stuff yet, that's fine. Just say that, but I have a new book that we're working on for 2023, 24, whichever. Because I know your readers want to know that. And then, are you on, what is your social media and your website addresses? So, I don't even know who to start with. I've just lost track of where I started. I knew I was going to do that. Melissa, I'm going to have you go first.
Okay. So Dangerous Beauty just came out a couple months ago, and I'm just started a novella that I'll offer for free that's connected to Dangerous Beauty. We're gonna find out what happens to one of the characters, one of like the side characters. And my website is melissacoswan.com, and I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all Melissa Coswan.
Awesome. Natalie? We're just gonna go around my circle.
Yes. So my next book, Blind Trust, is coming out in April of 2023. So next April. And that is the third book, the final book in the Snap Agency series. And Lila and Garcia's story, which I was told has all of the slow burn romance. And I was like, well, I don't know what that means, but okay. And so lots of people are excited for it. And I hope I did it justice. I do love them. They're very stubborn. And then you can find me at www.nataliewalterswriter.com, and I'm on social media as Natalie Walters Writer, Instagram, Facebook, and I love chatting with people there. So
awesome. Lynette? Oh, did we lose you finally?
Turn my
Oh.
Oh, she's there.
No, it's so good. So next book is Crossfire. It comes out in January 2023, and then that's the second book in the series. And so then Critical Threat comes out comes out the next January. So I'm all good. So those are the next books in the lineup, and you can find me at LynetteEaston.com. I'm on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/Lynette.Easton. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I am not on TikTok. Well, I think I'm on TikTok, but I never even think about TikTok. I don't use TikTok, so don't try to find me there.
And Lynn, what is your...
So,
I'm sorry, that made me giggle.
that's awesome. It's true. I feel the same way. My next book is Under Fire. It releases in March of 2023. It is the final book in the Defend and Protect series. It is Zane and Tessa's story, or as my editor likes to say, Zessa, which has been cracking me up ever since she said it for the first time. And it's, there's a lot of pressure on those third book couples, I think, because they've been building the whole time. They're harder to write. But I'm kind of like Natalie. I'm hoping I got it right. My editor liked it, so I'm like, okay. It is weird because it's done. It's so strange. It's completely out of my hands. I'm done with it, but it doesn't release until March. So yeah, that's the next one. And I can be found at Lynn H. Blackburn on social media. That's my website, lynhblackburn.com. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Honestly, I'm not really on Twitter that much, but I am there. Instagram and Facebook are my favorites. So that's where you can find me, Lynn H. Blackburn.
Nice. Well, thank you, ladies. Melissa, Lynn, Lynette, Natalie, this was way fun. I am looking forward to our next interview when we talk romantic, historical suspense in the Regency era. Did I get them all?
That's right.
And for
And
Vala's
thank you for
listening, we
putting up
got
with
it.
me in the car.
And that way,
Love
if Val's listening or Bethany is listening, though, we got your next book. It's going to be a #1 bestseller. I know it.
Right.
I love it.
But thank
Love
you,
it.
ladies. This was
Thank
so
you.
much fun and so interesting. It's just fascinating to find out different things that you guys find out in your writing and using your books and such. So thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate that. And everybody that enjoyed us or joined us online, thank you for joining us. I hope you had as much fun as we did. Lots of laughter, which is always a good thing. So hopefully we'll see you all soon. You guys have a good night. Bye now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.